Welcome to Accounting Life with Jotham Tai. Today's episode is Part 3, AI Accuracy and Controls. For a third and final time, we are joined by guest Jason Pikoos, Managing Partner of Client Experience at Connor Group. In this episode, we discuss concerns around compliance and controls, how accountants can see inside the AI black box, as well as what to look for in an AI vendor. Now, our host, Jotham Tai.
Hey, Jason, how's it going?
Hey, great to be here again, Jotham. Thanks for inviting me.
I am so glad that you are back for episode number 3 of our 3-part AI series. I know the last couple episodes, Jason, we kind of teed things up. We first talked about whether organizations or how organizations can determine whether they're ready for AI. In the second episode, we transition into talking about the different forms of AI and some of the standard use cases that you're seeing. But, of course, for those of us that are itching to get going with the technology and applying it to our day-to-day, in accounting, we have to consider the internal controls implications, compliance implications around using AI. So I guess starting there, Jason, I'll kick things off by asking, what are some of the compliance and controls concerns that you're hearing from finance teams that you're partnering with today?
Yeah, no, it's actually a great question. And it's one that, to be honest, I think is very much what we might think of as in progress, because there's certain things that we've been discussing from controls and compliance considerations that have been around for quite some time. And then there are ones where we are aware of them, but we actually haven't fully solved. So maybe let's start with the ones that we've been around for some time. There is definitely the concern around confidentiality and security. And that's a very valid one. It's not necessarily directly associated with the quality and accuracy of your financial reporting, but it is a real valid concern about where is your data, who is using your data, or can bad actors access your data and use your data inappropriately? Can you lose your data? So that certainly is a concern. I will maybe add a little bit of a nuance to that. Is one of the methods by which people are deploying AI is a methodology called RAG, or stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. It's when you put data into an environment and then the AI reads that data to improve the response. That is another form of data security concerns. Is does anybody have access to that data? Can they manipulate their data to manipulate the actions? But those are fairly well known. They've been around for quite some time. Valid concerns and things you need to deal with. The other concerns that people have from a controls and compliance standpoint, one is the risk around hallucinations, or the fact that the AI will produce inaccurate, incomplete, or frankly, a response that is not relevant. What we have also observed at times is the AI will typically give a response whether it actually has information or knows the answer. And that's always a concern for folks where, how do I know that this response, I've asked it to give me some information, maybe I've asked it to read a document or analyze something, and it's that stuff, it doesn't exist at all, but because the AI couldn't find it, it just produces something. So that hallucination is a real concern of how do I get comfortable that the AI is producing stuff that's accurate, that's complete, and that's actually relevant to me. Somewhat tied into that is when people put their hat off SOX compliance. Let's say I can get comfortable, and I am comfortable. I have a high degree of confidence the AI is producing accurate and relevant results. The question is, what does my control, if I'm applying SOX, or if I just want to have, frankly, good financial controls, what does my control need to look like that makes me comfortable that it is actually doing it that way? In other words, if my AI is reviewing a contract and extracting key terms and conditions, how do I know that it's doing that? Even if it does it well, how do I know that it's doing that? What should that control look like? How do I evidence that control, especially when you start thinking about Sarbanes-Oxley? And it's a really interesting question because I don't actually think we have a good answer for it yet of what do controls need to look like for AI? And we can talk about more of the other topics, but it's a really, because you effectively have a big black box in the middle there for some aspect of the process.
Well, you mentioned black box, and for us accountants, that's almost like a scary word, right? And when you think about publishing 10Qs and 10Ks, where to a certain degree you're relying on some kind of black box calculation, it's got to make accountants think about how quickly they adopt AI. So I guess along those lines, Jason, how can we see inside those black boxes?
Yeah, it's a good question. there is a component of it that is not easy to see. I mean, there is a bit of, most finance and accounting AI products are all leveraging the same models, whether it's ChatGPT or OpenAI's model or Llama from Meta or potentially Gemini from Google. We're all many times referencing multiple of these same models. And to a certain extent, there is inability to fully understand the inner workings of that. But there are things that if you are using AI embedded in a product that you can do and then you can ask for. One of the things that we're seeing most finance and accounting softwares do that are using AI is creating traceability and clear audit trails. In other words, when it's either extracting information for me or analyzing information for me, I have a very clear audit trail from the output that it provided back to the source information. Now, that works really well when you have very explicit data points. In other words, you're pulling out an invoice number or you're pulling out a product number, maybe product name from a contract or a price from a contract. It does get a little trickier when you're asking for a summary, because a summary by its definition is reading an entire document and giving you summarized bullets. So those you have to be more careful with, but they are creating audit trails of, I can go from the final output back to the source document, which is really important, as well as seeing audit trails of if people make corrections. So you might say, hey, it chose the wrong ID and I've changed it, creating those audit trails. That's one of the ways you do it. You can also, some of the AI products will also include this kind of concept of logic, where you can actually follow the logic that the AI went through to determine the outcome. Now, sometimes that works well, sometimes it doesn't, because sometimes it's not as clear for the AI to explain itself, but that is very, very helpful. There are other things that software companies are doing to improve the quality of the AI, and if you don't mind, I'll just touch on those very briefly. The audit trails is very helpful. If you're buying a product that has AI in it, whether it's your ERP or a standalone AI embedded product, they actually make the user interface very simple. I think one of the most difficult things, if people have used ChatGPT, to get a really good answer requires you to be very good at prompting. If you're not good at prompting, if you haven't practiced at prompting, if you don't prompt well, you get a very poor response. What a lot of the software is doing is making the user interface very easy, where users just have to add a couple of pieces of information, and there's a very powerful prompt that is written and defined and has been tested before. So user, I just add basic data. The AI software will actually take that and create a very powerful prompt for you. It's all invisible. In addition to that, they will have what they call as an agentive flow, which is basically when you have multiple AI agents in the process. So as opposed to having when you interact with ChatGPT, it's like one agent. You ask that question, that agent is responsive. But what you can do is you can actually create a sequence of agents. One will create maybe your prompt. The next one will run the prompt and get the data. The third one might actually evaluate and review it, act almost as a manager. Maybe the fifth one will actually organizing and giving you the right type of output. So it's a great way to validate and check the outcomes. Multi-models is also another mechanism where they will actually have both Meta and OpenAI's model ask the same question, compare the results. It's like asking two experts, right? If you get the similar answer, it is probably correct. So these are some of the ways that there are other tools that they use, but these are some of the ways where they actually are looking to improve the accuracy, the transparency, as well as allow users to see a little bit more inside the black box. But there still is a bit of a black box. You kind of make the black box a little smaller. You create the auditability much more easily. But there's a bit of a component of a black box still there, because we are still referencing a model that most of the software companies don't control. And by the way, it is changing very, very rapidly.
Well, as an advocate of this technology, Jason, I would argue that even in normal human work, there is a level of black box involved, right? Like what happens in our brains can't necessarily be documented in an audit work paper. I would love to touch on two things that you mentioned, which I think are incredibly important. And first of all, as a broader point, we look at and we hear black box, and I know the reaction is usually adverse from us accountants, but some of the examples that you shared, right? Multi-model, having two models check each other, great way to do a double check. And a couple minutes before that, you mentioned having multiple agents, right, in a workflow. And it reminds me of segregation of duties within agents. This might be the first time we've ever put those expressions together. Segregation of duties with you can develop that kind of model. All kidding aside, with the type of large language models out there, you can create the separation that I think is incredibly helpful. And I think what is even more powerful, the first point that you mentioned was, the audit trails, right? So you can leverage the same technology to generate an audit trail for you. But beyond that, you can have it furnish not only the audit trail of where data points were derived, but you can also do it to explain logic. Was your point? Like, how did you come about recommending, this input? And I think the technology is there for you to be able to, if you are a strong prompter, and I think maybe that's, one of the key takeaways too for me is that, I know you're very familiar with the large language models and prompting, but someone who is not prompting effectively could generate improper results. And so there's a lot of considerations for there, but the key thing I'm hearing is that there are many different ways to get comfortable with the black box. Is it going to be perfect? Probably not. But heck, as I mentioned, there's a level of black box that we accountants do too when we're processing transactions and work.
So yeah, I think it's a great point, by the way. I think where people are going to have to start orienting themselves when they think about these controls, we look at AI and it's a piece of technology, and therefore what we want to apply is the typical type of controls we put around systems. And I think we're probably going to have to think about AI differently, because it is partly our traditional technology and partly this large language model, which has kind of human logic almost built into it. You almost have to treat it as a combo of a systematic control and a human control, and think about it that way when you start designing controls and how do you get comfortable about it. But it's a new way of thinking that we're not necessarily very used to.
Well, I think two of anything to check something is better than one, right? Yeah. So whether it's one human or one AI, having both complement each other probably gets the best results. So, again, maybe that's coming from a place of an advocate here, but I firmly believe that that's the case. You talked about hallucinations earlier. Humans hallucinate, but if you have two sources, a human and ChatGPT, cross-checking each other, that now obviously increases the quality of the responses when you have one to check another. So checks and balances, your traditional accounting principle. So, I guess to feed off that point, Jason, how do you know the tool provides better results than the ChatGPT, for example?
It's a great question. I'll use your question basically, how do we know that the software that I'm using provides a better response than a ChatGPT directly? I think one is there's no third-party source that's going to tell you that. But what you're going to want to do, and we do encourage people, as you're looking to evaluate technology, choose those technologies that have trained their models to do a better job for the specific use case. That is one of the mechanisms by which you do get better results. I can load a contract into ChatGPT and I can ask it to give me a summary of the lease terms, for argument's sake. And it will probably do a decent job, but it's unlikely to do as well as a leasing tool that is trained its AI to really understand the nuances of the contract, and contract terms of a lease agreement. So that is one of those other mechanisms where these software companies are focused on certain use cases and certain scenarios and are really, really training their models. So you want to look for those audit trails. You want to make sure that those models are trained. But man, and you actually will find most of these AI software companies will actually strongly recommend a proof of concept to show you and to get comfort that you're actually, even before you do a full-scale implementation, do a proof of concept to see that it's actually producing a fairly strong result. It's never going to be perfect, as you alluded to. It's in many respects kind of like a human. So expecting perfection from a human, we would never expect that. We would expect humans to make mistakes. Do a good job. The more experienced the human, the better the results might be. Similar to a model, the more experience it has, the more opportunities as it gets and more expert in your environment will do better and better. But you should expect some degree of error, which is somewhat normal given these models. But then the other thing is you need to do some very thorough testing before you go live with the product to make sure that it is giving you that, whatever your threshold is, at 70, is it 80, is it 90% accuracy, so that you're comfortable to continue moving forward with that. I think it'll be a really important component. I think the other thing that you want us to keep in mind, yes, there's recurring controls, but you should also think about periodic come back and doing some sort of more structured testing, because a software that's using OpenAI's ChatGPT capabilities, when ChatGPT 5 comes out, the baseline infrastructure and kind of the power base behind the product has just changed. So in addition to your proof of concept, your testing before you go live, and your kind of recurring control, as there are major releases for any of the underlying models, I encourage people to retest those products as well, at least for the foreseeable future. Yes, the software providers no doubt will do the testing, but I encourage you to test it yourself, because those, when ChatGPT, for example, 5 comes out, the Llama 3 just came out, a Gemini 2 will come out soon. Those all can be very, very big changes. Now, the presumption is they should be getting better. But I guess as accountants, we live in a world of trust but verify. So I would encourage you to trust and then verify it by testing it again as we have major model changes.
Well, and it sounds like those are the same principles that we think about even in today's financial systems world, right? So whenever there's a new release in NetSuite, best practice to do change management testing, right? Make sure that it's deployed in Sandbox first. They only do 2 releases a year. So you want to make sure that your workflows are preserved with these changes, and it's no different than new releases of GPT-5 or Llama 3 and so on. So again, great points, and I like to bring that up, and I like to use expressions that are familiar to us accountants, because hopefully this type of change management expectation doesn't deter anyone from trying this technology, because I do believe there are certain principles that you can apply that we're already used to, so that this doesn't become a blocker for you to try out this technology. So as you can tell, again, I'm a huge proponent of adopting this technology, because I think it's just absolutely incredible. And over time, it's just demonstrated that it can provide a lot of value to what we do as accountants. And it's again, there's some cautiousness that is warranted. And so as I think about, Jason, and segueing to my last question here, you're looking for an AI vendor, you're searching around, maybe, calling some vendors. Like, what are some of the things that you should be looking for in that process?
It's great. And I agree with you, by the way. I'm a big proponent of it. I think what you touched on is spot on, by the way. It's a lot of the good principles that we've applied to up until today are very relevant in the world of AI. We just need to apply them maybe in a slightly different way, but they are very applicable. It's not as if Gen AI is something so brand new that everything we've done in the past is out the window. But when selecting vendors, it's a really, really good thing to be aware of, and a few points to think about as you're kind of selecting some of these AI software vendors. There's your typical stuff. Make sure they have their SOC 1s, SOC 2s, SOC 1s, especially if the product is actually embedded within your finance and accounting flow. If it maybe not directly embedded within your finance and accounting flow, but maybe just used in an ancillary fashion, at least the SOC 2 to give you comfort about the security and confidentiality of your data. SOC 1, if it's actually once again embedded in the flow. I think, so those are always important. Other things to think about is, even with a SOC 1 or SOC 2, you've got to want to really understand what's the nature of the environment setup. In other words, do they share your information? Can they use your information to train their models? Can they use that information to respond to other customers? Or is this a true multi-tenant environment where whatever you put in stays within your environment and is not shared outside, nor is it used for training the models? It's a really big question, because some people have major concerns. I mean, there are advantages to allowing AI companies to use your data to train their model, because you will get better responses by mere fact that they're using the model, they're using your data and other people's data to produce better results. But you may not be comfortable with that. You may not want your data to be used to respond to others. So really, really important to ask a lot of good questions about what is the setup? What does my environment look like? What do you do with my data? How does it stored? Do you share it? Do you use it to train your models? Make sure you ask those questions. And then ask a little bit about what is the vendor? What capabilities have they embedded within their product to improve the quality, the accuracy, the relevance, right? Do they have ways to make my prompting better? Do they use that agentic workflow? Can I see a very clear audit trail going from end to end to the source documentation? Do I have good audit trails if people are changing things? Your typical stuff that you want to do in any application is, does it have a good audit trail of users and access and configuration changes? Or are you using multiple models, right? Are you training a model? Are you using multi-models? All of those are really good questions to also give yourself a sense of kind of the quality of the output. So it's SOC reports, make sure they're comfortable. 2 is make sure that you understand how the data is being used. And then 3, what is built within the application to produce better results for you, right? What are they doing? What I also suggest, it's not necessarily relevant for the immediate use case, but hey, you might as well ask them what's on the roadmap, what's coming up next, because many of these tools, what you're getting buying right now, which is probably true in some respect for most SaaS applications, that has been true for a while. You're not really buying a product today, you're buying the roadmap. It's very, very true for AI. Many of these tools have a great capability now, but what's really exciting is what they're going to have in 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 24 months. So I would also find out about where they are from a roadmap. What other cool features are you actually buying today that will be available for you in the future?
That last part there, I'm very familiar with. Prospect. What does our roadmap look like 10 years from now? All kidding aside, it's definitely a very valid question. And as a SaaS provider, and same would hold true with AI, you're not selling a CD that needs to be upgraded. That was way more aging myself now in that comment. But these are all very good thoughts. And the SOC report, absolutely important, regardless of what kind of technology you implement, AI or not. And then knowing what how your data is going to be used is critical. And I think for those that maybe aren't as competent in terms of asking the right questions from an AI data privacy perspective, this is why I'm so excited to partner with firms like Connor Group on helping companies figure out how to navigate through those types of questions. Because again, you don't last pitch for the technology, Jason. You don't want to just pump the brakes because you don't have a way of understanding what you need to understand to really capitalize on this new technology. And if that means partnering with firms like Connor Group and others, I think it is just a worthwhile process. And it's the same thing 5 or 10 years ago with cloud, right? When people weren't really sure how to go from on-prem to cloud and what that meant in their environments. You always had specialized experts who can navigate you through that, and it's no different now. The benefits of AI in today's environment is just too incredible to pass up. So we're really glad to have you on, Jason, for these 3 episodes. Hopefully the audience has come up with a lot of great takeaways as they get their AI journeys started. And would love to check back in a few months and do another session on ChatGPT 5 or whenever new developments are then.
Yeah, that'd be great. You know where to find me. I'd love to join again. I agree with you. I mean, we encourage people, use the product, use the technology, because I think one of the biggest concerns that people have around this technology is not understanding it. And therefore, the risks are real. I don't want to take away, but they get overinflated. They don't feel like there's a method of dealing with those. And therefore, the value of just taking a few steps and adopting the technology means you learn the technology. You then know, you have a realistic view of how to manage these risks, and therefore you can actually mitigate them. But anyway, love to be back again. Let me know when you guys are available, and in a few months' time, who the heck knows what will be. I'm sure there'll be some significant advancements.
It'll be significant, but I'm sure just as exciting.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks again, Jason. We'll talk soon.
Absolutely. Cheers.
Thanks for stopping by. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you want more information, please check us out at gapify.com, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.